I am 52 years old, and for most of my adult life I believed I was married to a good man. My husband Richard is the chief financial officer of a growing tech company here in Seattle. For 25 years I've been the woman who kept everything steady: the home, the finances, the family. Richard has always been the ambitious one, the man who worked late, who brought home the stories about board meetings and investment rounds I only half understood. That Thursday morning began like any other. Richard rushed out before sunrise, mumbling something about a breakfast meeting with the CEO. I watched him button his cufflinks, kiss my cheek, and say, "Don't wait up tonight, okay? It'll be a long day." It was a sentence I'd heard so many times I could almost say it with him. By noon I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: bring him lunch. I thought maybe he'd smile seeing me at his office door with his favorite Latin turkey sandwich. I wanted to remind him that behind all his numbers and deadlines, there was still someone who cared. When I walked into the glass building that housed his company, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. A young man at the security desk looked up as I approached. "Good afternoon," I said. "I'm here to see Richard Blake." He smiled politely, then frowned as he checked his list. "I'm sorry, Mom, but Mr. Blake just left with his wife." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me." He turned the screen toward me. "Mr. Blake and Mrs. Blake checked out about 10 minutes ago. They're probably heading to the restaurant across the street." For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I forced a smile and said, "My mistake. I must be a little behind." Then I walked back to my car, holding the coffee and sandwich that suddenly felt absurdly heavy. Sitting behind the wheel, I stared at the building's reflective glass. There she was, whoever she was, the wife who had walked out with my husband. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat there in the stillness thinking. People imagine heartbreak as an explosion, something loud and chaotic, but mine came quietly, like the sound of a lock turning on a door I thought was open. I drove home without drinking the coffee, without eating the sandwich, already knowing something inside me had shifted forever. That night I couldn't sleep. Richard came home late, as usual, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. When I asked how his day had gone, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Busy but good." Then he disappeared into his office, claiming he had a few last emails to send. I stood in the doorway, watching his reflection in the dark window. He looked calm, too calm for a man who'd supposedly been in meetings since sunrise. The next morning, while he showered, I picked up his suit jacket to hang it neatly. That's when I noticed a folded receipt in the inner pocket. It was from a restaurant downtown, the Harbor Suits, and dated 3 nights earlier. The bill showed dinner for 2, a bottle of wine, and dessert. No mention of a business client, no third entry, just 2. I remembered that night clearly. He had called to say he was working late at the office, crunching numbers for the quarterly report. I placed the receipt back exactly where I found it. I wasn't ready for a confrontation, not yet. I wanted to be certain. Over the next few weeks I started noticing patterns, tiny cracks in the story of our marriage that had once seemed solid. His phone always face down, his laptop always locked, business trips that conveniently extended into weekends. I began keeping a small notebook in my purse, jotting down dates, times, places. It wasn't about revenge at first, it was about understanding. I needed to know when my marriage had ended, and whether I'd missed the signs or simply chosen not to see them. One night, when he was working late, I opened his briefcase. Inside, tucked between spreadsheets and contracts, was a small key with a metal tag that read Apt 204, Lakeview Towers. My heart thudded in my chest as I turned it over in my hand. We didn't own any property other than our home. There was no reason for Richard to have an apartment key. The following Saturday I drove to Lakeview Towers, a sleek high-rise overlooking the water. The front desk clerk barely looked up as I walked past. My palms were sweating, but I held my head high. I wanted to see with my own eyes what kind of life my husband was living when he wasn't pretending to live with me. As I pulled into the parking garage, a silver Lexus drove past, Richard's Lexus. I ducked behind a pillar just in time to see him step out of the car. He was wearing jeans and a casual blazer, the kind of outfit he used to wear on our date nights. Then she appeared, a younger woman, maybe 30, with long brown hair and the kind of confident smile that comes from believing you've already won. She kissed him on the cheek and handed him a grocery bag. They looked like any couple heading home from shopping. I waited until they went inside before following. It turned smoothly. Inside, the space smelled faintly of his cologne and something floral. The living room was tidy, modern, and unmistakably lived in. On the coffee table sat 2 wine glasses, a half-burned candle, and a framed photo of Richard and the woman laughing together on a beach. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe this was some misunderstanding, a client, a project, something innocent. But then I saw the second photo, the one that erased every trace of denial. It was Richard holding her from behind, both of them smiling, and her left hand rested over his chest, where a wedding ring should have been but wasn't. I stood there in the silence, feeling my world tilt. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a secret life built on my trust and his lies. I closed the door quietly behind me and walked away, the key still warm in my hand. I didn't cry, not yet. I had work to do. When I got home that evening, I went straight to the bathroom and washed my hands, as if I could rinse away what I'd just seen. The apartment, the photos, the laughter, they looped in my head like a film I couldn't turn off. For hours I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Then, slowly, the numbness gave way to clarity. I needed to know everything. The next morning, while Richard was out meeting clients, I drove back to that apartment. I didn't hesitate this time. The building was quiet, the hallway carpet soft under my shoes. Apartment 204 opened easily again. Inside, daylight poured through the tall windows, revealing details I hadn't noticed before. There were 2 coffee mugs in the sink, a woman's scarf draped across the chair, and a stack of mail on the counter, all addressed to Richard Blake. He hadn't just been visiting, he lived here. I walked through each room, taking quiet inventory. There were clothes hanging neatly in the closet, his suits beside her dresses. His cologne stood next to her perfume. The bathroom had 2 toothbrushes, side by side like a punchline I didn't find funny. Every corner of that place was a monument to his double life. On the dresser sat a small leather folder. I opened it, expecting to find bank statements or work papers. Instead, I found something far worse. It was a draft of divorce papers, my name typed neatly at the top. The words "irreconcilable differences" glared back at me. In the attached notes, I read phrases like emotional withdrawal and financial incompatibility. Richard's handwriting filled the margins, strategizing how to make me look like the cold, distant spouse. My hands trembled as I read. For years, I'd been the one paying bills, managing our home, supporting his career. I'd built a life around this man, and now I was reading the blueprint of how he intended to dismantle it. Then, at the bottom of the folder, another document caught my eye, a business proposal with both Richards and the woman's names printed across the top. Richard Blake, Sophie Turner. Expansion Plan 2025. My stomach turned. Sophie wasn't just his affair, she was his new partner in every sense. They were merging lives, careers, and futures, all while I was being quietly written out of my own story. I looked around that apartment one last time. The photos, the dishes, the life that was supposed to be mine but wasn't. Then I did what Richard would never expect. I began taking photos, every detail, every document, every lie made tangible. By the time I locked the door behind me, I wasn't just a wife who'd been betrayed. I was an accountant again, a woman who understood that evidence was power, and I had just gathered enough to change everything. That night, Richard came home whistling. I watched him from across the kitchen island as he poured himself a glass of wine, scrolling through his phone. "You okay?" he asked when he finally noticed me staring. "I'm fine," I said softly, and I meant it in a strange way. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. The shock had passed, now there was only focus. Over the next several days, I became 2 different people. By day, I was still the attentive wife who packed his lunch, smiled at his stories, and pretended not to notice when he worked late. But by night, I was building a quiet case, documenting transfers, printing emails, gathering receipts. I knew he'd been moving funds between our joint account and a private one under his name, disguised as business reimbursements. I tracked every dollar. On Thursday, I made an appointment with our old attorney, Daniel Myers. He had helped us with our estate planning years ago, and he still greeted me with the same gentle professionalism. When I placed the folder of documents on his desk, he flipped through the pages slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Evelyn," he said finally, "this isn't just an affair. It's financial misconduct. He's been using marital assets to support another household." I nodded. "And he's preparing to file for divorce first, hoping to make it look like I drove him away." Daniel leaned back, folding his hands. "Then we'll make sure he never gets the chance." You're going to take control of the narrative before he does. For the next week, we worked quietly. I opened a new bank account in my name, secured all our important documents, and moved my personal valuables into a safety deposit box. I copied everything: emails, transaction logs, even screenshots of his calendar entries with Sophie's name. Through it all, I remained calm. Richard had no idea that the woman sitting across from him at dinner was preparing to dismantle his lies one piece at a time. The hardest part wasn't the deception, it was pretending I still loved him. Every time he leaned in to kiss me goodnight, I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. By Friday evening, Daniel called. "Everything's ready," he said. "Once you're sure you're done pretending, we file Monday morning." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in the dark living room, staring at the framed photo of our wedding day. Two people smiling, full of hope, unaware of the distance time would carve between them. I whispered to that photo, not out of anger but out of closure, "You wanted a new life, Richard. You're about to get one." Saturday morning dawned quiet and gray, the kind of morning that made the whole city feel still. I woke early, brewed a pot of coffee, and laid out the folder on the kitchen table. Every page, every photograph, every receipt was neatly organized, a story of betrayal told in numbers and dates. When Richard came downstairs, he looked relaxed, humming as he adjusted his tie. "Morning," he said casually, reaching for his mug. "You're up early." I nodded toward the table. "You forgot something." He frowned, setting the mug down. "What's all this?" "Evidence," I said simply. "Of the apartment at Lakeview Towers. Of Sophie Turner. Of the money you've been transferring out of our joint account. Of the divorce papers you were planning to file." For a moment he just stared at me, the color draining from his face. Then came the performance, shaking his head, forcing a laugh, the practiced sincerity of a man who'd lied for a long time. "Evelyn, this isn't what you think, I can explain." I raised a hand. "Please don't, you've already explained enough with your actions." He opened his mouth again, then closed it when he saw my calm expression. That, more than anything, seemed to unsettle him. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I was finished. "I've already spoken to Daniel Myers," I continued. "We'll be filing for divorce Monday morning. You might want to prepare your lawyer." His shoulders slumped, the mask finally cracking. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We can work something out." I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the man I'd married, but the man who'd chosen lies over love. "No, Richard," I said. "You've already worked everything out. I'm just finishing the math." Then I picked up the folder, walked past him, and left the room. Behind me, the silence was deafening. Monday came with a strange kind of calm. The city was waking up to another ordinary week, but for me, it was the beginning of the end of a lie. I met Daniel at his office just after 9. He slid the divorce petition across the desk, and I signed my name with steady hands. There was no shaking, no hesitation. My marriage had already ended long before the paperwork caught up. That afternoon, while Richard was at work, Daniel submitted the documents and served notice through the firm. The news reached him before dinner. I knew because he didn't come home that night. Instead, I received a short text: "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I almost laughed. The irony was exhausting. He had betrayed me for years, and now he was shocked that I'd stopped playing the quiet, loyal wife in his script. But the divorce filing was only half of it. There was something else, something bigger. Daniel had suggested we notify the company's board of directors about Richard's financial misconduct. He'd been funneling company funds into personal accounts, labeling them as executive bonuses. The same bonuses, I discovered, that paid for the apartment and Sophie's travel expenses. We drafted a formal report and sent it anonymously to the board chair, along with evidence from company records I'd copied from Richard's laptop. I didn't need to lie or exaggerate. The truth was enough. 2 days later, Richard's name started disappearing from company emails. Meetings were canceled. His assistant stopped answering calls. Then, a week later, it hit the Business News CFO under internal review for financial irregularities. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it or tell friends. I simply watched the story unfold in silence. My revenge didn't need fireworks, it lived quietly in the truth. Richard showed up at the house one night, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his voice rough. "You're destroying me," he said. I met his eyes. "No, Richard, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." For a long moment we stood there, the air thick with everything unspoken. Then he left, and I knew he wouldn't be back. Weeks later, the company announced his resignation. Sophie disappeared from the public eye soon after. I never raised my voice, never slammed a door, never sought to humiliate him. I simply let the truth breathe. And in the quiet that followed, something miraculous happened. I started breathing again, too. My revenge wasn't loud, it was dignified, and it was final. A year later, I woke to the soft sound of rain against the windows of my new apartment overlooking Lake Union. The air smelled of coffee and peace. My life had shrunk in size but grown in meaning. No more bored dinners, no more pretending, no more walking on emotional eggshells. Just me, a small balcony, and the freedom to live honestly. I started volunteering with a local nonprofit that helped women rebuild after divorce. It felt strange at first, sharing my story in front of strangers. But soon I realized my pain had become someone else's roadmap. One woman told me, tears in her eyes, "You make me believe it's possible to start over." I smiled because I knew exactly what she meant. Richard tried to contact me twice. The first time, he sent a polite message about clearing up financial details. The second time he called, his voice was tired, deflated. "Evelyn," he said, "I made mistakes. I just want to talk." I let him finish, then replied quietly, "I spent years listening to you talk, Richard. You never said anything that matched your actions. I think we're done." He sighed, muttered something about wishing me well, and hung up. That was the last time I heard from him. The board at his old company completed their investigation. The results were public enough that no one in the industry would hire him again in a leadership role. Sophie left the city soon after. People whispered, but I didn't engage. Revenge had already done its work, it had restored balance. One evening, as I walked along the pier, the sunset painted the water gold. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who waited up at night, believing love meant endurance. I whispered to her in my mind, "You made it." Peace doesn't come when life is perfect. It comes when you stop begging someone else to see your worth. It comes when you stop cleaning up the messes they made and start building your own tomorrow. Now, my mornings are quiet but full. I read, I cook, I laugh again. There's no bitterness left, just understanding. Sometimes strength looks like silence, and victory looks like peace. If you've ever been betrayed, remember this: you don't need to destroy them to reclaim yourself. Just step back and let the truth finish what it started. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment, share it, or tell me where you're watching from. Your voice might be the light that helps someone else find their way out of the dark. It's been almost 2 years since that day in the lobby when a security guard told me my husband had already left with his wife. I sometimes replay that moment, not out of pain anymore, but out of gratitude, because that was the day I stopped living on autopilot. That was the day my real life began. People often ask me if I ever forgave Richard. The truth is, forgiveness came quietly, long after the anger faded. Not because he deserved it, but because I refused to carry him with me any longer. Hatred is a heavy suitcase, and I wanted both hands free for better things. There are still moments when I see couples holding hands in the street, and wonder if they truly see each other, or if one of them is already looking somewhere else. But then I remind myself that love isn't about control or sacrifice. It's about truth, respect, and choice. Richard chose deceit. I chose peace, and I would make the same choice again, every single time. Life after betrayal isn't the same, but it can be better. I found joy in small things again: the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of rain, the laughter of new friends who know me for who I am now, not who I was pretending to be. Sometimes I still pass by the building where his company used to be. The logo is gone, a new business moved in. The marble floors are polished, the lobby freshly painted. It's as if the past has been scrubbed clean, but I know what happened there. And strangely I smile, because even the most painful places can become reminders of how far you've come. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, I want you to remember this: revenge doesn't have to be cruel. It can be calm, thoughtful, and rooted in dignity. The loudest victory is often the quietest one, walking away with your integrity intact while they stumble under the weight of their own lies. For me, revenge wasn't about destroying Richard's life, it was about reclaiming mine. I didn't need to ruin him. I only needed to stop allowing him to define me. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who was betrayed. I see the woman who survived, rebuilt, and refused to let bitterness win. This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of a life lived on my own terms. And if you're standing where I once stood, lost and afraid, believe me when I say, the day you decide to stop fighting for someone who never fought for you is the day you finally start fighting for yourself. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you've been through something similar, if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, know this: you're not broken, and you're not alone. What happened to you doesn't define you, what you choose to do next does. Sometimes life doesn't give us justice in the way we imagine, it gives us clarity instead. And with that clarity comes power, the power to walk away, to start over, to live freely without fear of being lied to again. I used to think revenge meant making someone else pay. Now I understand the real victory is peace, quiet, steady, unstoppable peace that grows when you finally let go. So if you're still hurting, take a deep breath, turn that pain into wisdom, not bitterness. The best way to win is to live beautifully and truthfully, no matter who tried to break you. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more stories of strength, truth, and the courage to begin again. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't what you do to them, it's who you become.